You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
We're doing good, man. We just continue to inch on closer. We got the first full week of preseason games under our belt. We've made it through with really no catastrophic big name injuries to speak of, outside of maybe Carson Wentz, Quentin Nelson, and other than that, we're pretty good here. So we made it through 1 week. We got a couple weeks left to go here, but it's draft season, so I'm happy.
Absolutely. Alex, how are you doing tonight?
We're doing all right. I'm a little fired up from our pre-show conversation, but that's for another day. That's what we call a tease in the business. Well, we will we'll bring that up later, but it's good. Taking part in my first, real official draft of the fantasy football season in our Guillotine League that we're doing, and had some successes, had some interesting purchases, but happy to be back, really focused in on fantasy football, and I was having fun calling out how much guys were going for.
Yeah, it's a very interesting league, very interesting dynamic where you're talking a 24-team league, auction style, salary cap type of drafting, and on top of that, it's super flex. So It's insane.
That's a lot. Yeah, jeez.
It is. But guys, we do have a special guest with us tonight. We've got Eric coming to us. He's with the Triple Play Fantasy folks over there. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. You know, I gotta say, I love the music on the intro. It's so catchy. Is that like a banjo or something?
No banjo in that one.
It's
but,
whatever random instruments he found on GarageBand.
Man, let me play with GarageBand for, I don't know, that was an afternoon, and we'll come up with an intro song. So
it's catchy. But
there you go. That's a lot of work for 30 seconds, but
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. Excited to talk some football.
Absolutely. So, guys, you can catch Eric. He is part of the Triple Play Fantasy. Obviously, you can see his tag right there at Triple Play Fantasy over there on Twitter. You can also follow him on his handle. That's E_men_D at the Twitter. So you can also hit him up there. We've had some pretty good conversations going back and forth, and pretty active in the space, does some good things there. And so does Triple Play Fantasy. But Eric, every time we have somebody come on here, we got to know, how did you get your start in fantasy football?
So we started at, kind of like a home high school league, and my friends were into football. I didn't really watch it growing up. I was more into basketball and baseball. And it's so funny. My first pick ever in fantasy football was the year Tom Brady tore his ACL. So I almost gave up right away, because it was the year before he threw 50 touchdowns. You're like, oh, quarterback's a safe pick. He tears his ACL, and you're like, do I really want to do this? But when you play with friends, and I'm sure you guys know as well, it just makes it really fun and kind of like a brotherhood type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We've let's see, what, year 13 we're starting?
Yeah.
Home league, so
keep going. I think we're up at 16, aren't we?
I'd have to go back.
That's the thing. And it's going to be like 30, 40 years, type thing. So it's cool when something like that, year in, year out, it's going to happen as long as there's football.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. It's fun. It's fun to bust each other's chops. It's fun, to have the bragging rights, as Alex currently does have. I'm sure he'll find a way to slide that into the show again somewhere. But right on. So I guess moving off of that and into this current season, right now that you're prepping, we're in draft season, we're kind of getting ready to go. Like, who's a guy that you're higher on than everybody else? And who's a guy that you think, I guess, less of than what the industry would tell people?
So we were talking on our wide receiver ranking shows today, and for me, I feel like I'm lower on Calvin Ridley than most. And I know everybody's, he's going to be the wide receiver one. And I look at the game where he played Jair Alexander last year, and he had a goose egg on 5 targets. And I'm looking at some of the corners he has to face this year. He has to face Marshawn Lattimore twice. He has to face Stephon Gilmore. He has to face Xavier Howard. He has to face good pass defense or good pass rushes of Washington and Tampa early on. I'm not saying he's not going to be a number one receiver. I have him as like in the 6-7 range. And I really like Zeke, and he's actually my RB3. A healthy O-line, a base floor of 8 touchdowns. Has only missed one game in his career. I think he's probably one of the safest picks in fantasy you can get.
I love that. I've been pounding the Zeke train for a while this offseason. So
he's not a sexy pick, but like he's going to produce. He's RB2 numbers at worst.
No, I'd agree. And I think McCarthy is going to use Zeke a little bit more because he saw what the team is without Dak, and you got to protect your investment in the quarterback and get your use out of the money you're spending on your running back all at the same time. So
6-year, $90 million.
Yeah, I like Zeke a lot.
Pardon the vanity from Derek there as he's checking to make sure everything's working out. You can hear yourself talking. Derek looked like the high schooler who got caught in the back of class with his phone going off right there. That was funny.
It might be accurate. It might be accurate.
Eric, what is your, we were talking before we got going here. We're the Guillotine League, I guess, as we were going here. The Guillotine League that we're in. Obviously, we have our home league that we're in that, has kind of a scoring on steroids format. But what is your favorite type of fantasy, your favorite format of fantasy football to play?
So my home league that we just did our draft for, it's been non-PPR since we ever started. So I was so used to that. And then I did PPR, and it's like, and I feel like half is good in the middle. Like someone like J.D. McKissick shouldn't be as valuable as he is in PPR if he gets 8 catches for like 12 yards. But I think there should be something rewarded for catching a ball. It's not a given that somebody isn't going to drop it or that it's going to be an accurate pass. So I think it values wide receivers more, and especially the pass catching running backs like McCaffrey, Kamara that can do both. It factors that in as well.
Very good. Have you played in a Guillotine League before?
I haven't, because I do fantasy baseball and fantasy basketball is what I'm in, like 5 or 6 leagues. It's just, I haven't had the time to learn all of it. And I feel like most Guillotine leagues are like super competitive or expensive buy, and it's like, I already know I wouldn't be good right away. Well, yours sounds fun. Yours sounds fun.
It's a very fun format. This is our first time doing this massive one. We kind of flirted with it last year when we had our first go around with it. And there's been some other formats, league formats. One that I am actually looking at getting into a little bit more this year is the DFS and the best ball types.
DFS is fun because like there was a lineup I had that was like very good. Unfortunately, I did it a 50-50 for $5. It was the week a couple years ago where Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller connected for like 3 touchdowns. And you just see like how much money you can make off of that. And it's like, you could just be good one week and it's life-changing money.
Absolutely. So DFS is an absolute trip, but it's also one of those that I have not fared very well in it. So I'm going to have to spend a lot more time digging into that to really try and win some cash on that one this year. But you guys have got a lot of really cool stuff kind of going over there at Trip Play Fantasy. What are some of the things that you're really kind of proud about that you've worked on recently, or something that you've got coming down the pipeline?
Just, how we started this as a hobby, just like the way that you guys did, and seeing, we're very active in athlete interviews, and everybody asks, how do you get these people on? And it's really just shooting your shot, and it's a numbers game. And there are so many people we don't hear back from or say no, but then there are the guys that say yes, and that just really make it rewarding. And being able to follow all 3 sports can sometimes be a little taxing when, it's still fantasy baseball season, but fantasy football season is coming around the corner, and we're just at the expo, but you're getting ready for the playoffs. So it can be a little hectic trying to balance all of them. You feel like you're not giving all of them your desired attention, whether it's drafting or trying to finish out the season strong. But it's just cool because I think we're in a market that nobody else really is. And, that it's our passion, like we say at the end of the day, and it's something that we've seen growth for, as I'm sure you guys have as well.
Very cool. And then too, how can the listeners connect with you and the guys over there?
Yeah, so I run the Twitter account at AAA Fantasy. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, basically anywhere you can find us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We'll have some sort of media there.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think it's time we start talking about some tier-based drafting, right? We started kind of setting some of the stage for that last week, but let's go to give the viewers a recap as far as, kind of the why behind tier-based drafting or kind of your nugget there around tier-based drafting. So tier-based drafting, that is the topic. Guys, who wants to kick us off?
I'll let Kevin go because he speaks so much more eloquently about it than I do, because I really only look at tier-based for one position group. But Kevin has a much broader scope with how he attacks a tier-based draft strategy.
So I guess when I'm looking at tier-based drafting, right, I'm looking at groups of guys who are not necessarily even they're going around the same ADP, but they're not all completely bunched in. But a lot of it's I look at it as the probability of finishing at the high end of that tier, right? So running backs, for example, you have McCaffrey, who is almost in a tier all to himself, as we saw in 2019, right? Like there's just not another offense that features their running back quite like Christian McCaffrey does. But coming off the injury, it kind of brings that back down to earth a little bit. So, for running backs in general, it's McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Zeke, Henry, that range. And a lot of it depends on your scoring format too, right? So if you're in a PPR, maybe Derrick Henry doesn't quite reach that high. Maybe someone like an Austin Eckler gets a bump up. I really like Austin Eckler this year. I really like the fact that I believe the Chargers are going to implement a lot of the Saints offense with their offensive coordinator coming over from New Orleans. So I think Austin Eckler has sneaky great upside and can easily see him finish inside the top 5 this year with that Alvin Kamara type production with 80 plus receptions on top of him running the ball. And all that's coming off of 15 to 17 touches a game. So anyway, so that's where I see it. So I kind of break it out into segments, right? Like you start getting into some of these mid tiers, and it's really who, if I have Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton, who else? Kenny Golladay, just kind of jumbling names together here a little bit. But if you take these guys, then it's off the tier base. Like, do I feel like all these guys can finish scoring in about the same area? Okay, if that answer is yes, they all belong in the same tier. But now the rankings within that tier, like what is the probability of this guy finishing at the top end of that tier? Or the guy who's at the bottom probably has the greatest likelihood of dropping a tier down based off the offense, based on philosophy, target share metrics that we've seen over years. So there is a lot to the tier-based system that, it's hard to explain in a quick 5-minute segment, but when I'm going through and breaking them down, I spend, hours looking over tier-based drafts. And that's so the end game is so you don't get pigeonholed into one guy is ultimately what it is in that segment, right? Like I may not love Team X, the Raiders. Okay. I may not love the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay. But when I'm looking at running backs, if Josh Jacobs is on the board and then for whatever reason, it's Myles Gaskin and, Joe Mixon. And there's a big range, and I understand that Mixon is going in the second, Jacobs is going in the third, and Gaskin's going in the fifth. Like I understand where their ADPs are, but scoring formats, whatever. These guys are jumbled up. He might be the best option for me, even if Mixon's on the board, right? I think that the Bengals are going to be trailing more than the Raiders. So I think that takes Mixon out. I don't love the consistency that Mixon's had over the last 2 years. but he's the only show in town. So that's where you have to balance that out a little bit. So it's just one of those formulas, right? We built the sheets. We're going to put them up on the website to have kind of the final product out in front. But that's all the process of thinking behind it and trying to understand, player A through Z, where are these guys going to finish, and what are the likelihoods of the top end or the bottom end? Is their production really going to come into?
Absolutely. Take a quick moment here. Shout out Hollywood Titan for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in and getting that fantasy knowledge. Alex, what are your thoughts on the tier base?
So I started with when I was really looking at it, the tier base to me was, and it really focused on tight end. And tight end was one of those positions where there were clear cut, and this is low hanging fruit, but there were clear cut tiers of where the top 2 or 3 were going to be head and shoulders above the next 5 or 6, right? That's how I kind of looked at it. What's happened as we've talked about this is that this tier-based strategy, if you do it and you stick to it, it's more of a scientific way of going about of drafting your team. Because look, right, wrong, or indifferent, we all got into fantasy football because we like football, and generally we got into fantasy football because we're fans of a certain football team. That's what introduced us to football. And so we might value a player from our favorite team a little bit more than a player from a different team, even though the player from the different team is probably going to do or might do better than the player from our team. And so what it does is it takes your fandom hat off. It puts your I'm here to win cash and trophies hat on. And it really helps you when you go into the draft room, when you're just going in with the simple purpose of I'm here to win this league. I don't care who I take to accomplish that goal, but I want to make sure that I'm taking the best players in my mind, removing their name and who they play for almost out of the equation. In terms of a fan perspective, and then you go in and you take, you get the best player for your team at that certain point in the draft. It also has benefits too of, say there's, a tier position or a tier group from the wide receivers or a tier group from running backs. Well, if you think that your tier group from the running backs is probably going to, at the end of the season, that group is going to put up more points than the tier group from the wide receivers, well, maybe you look running back at that point, and instead of going to wide receiver, because the goal is get as many points as you possibly can by the end of the season, and get as many points week in and week out. So that's where this tier-based strategy, it's a very, very smart and efficient strategy if you stick to it and you stick to your guns of what you think is going to happen throughout the course of the draft. And it removes the fandom hat that you have, and will help you kind of create the best fantasy football, your own fantasy football team versus, hey, we're all Denver Broncos fans. Let's draft, all these Denver Broncos players.
Absolutely.
Well,
Eric,
one more quick piece is the tier base formula helps from chasing the runs, right? In every draft, there's a run across multiple position groups, depending on the round and everything else. And it really helps hone in, all right, where do I need to chase? Where am I in the middle of a run, and where are we at the tail end? And maybe I'm grabbing a player because it's a position of need, but he's the last one at that tier. Going through my personal tier rankings, I have Najee Harris and Josh Jacobs back-to-back in rankings, but Najee's a tier above Jacobs. So when I'm in the middle of that run, that's where I'm looking at things like, okay, if I feel like I need running back here and that's what's going to best suit my team needs and what's on the board and what I think can come back to me, grab the running back now and don't wait until things settle in. So that's where it helps a lot too. So you're not chasing the run and you're reaching for players in an unnecessary position.
Absolutely. Eric, now We spend a lot of time talking tier-based stuff over here. Is tier-based a system that you employ when you go into a fantasy draft?
I mean, I think there's tentative tiers, and once again, I think it's how you value players. When I look at it, and I know running backs are the next one in particular, I look at what's the greatest possible outcome. Like for quarterbacks, the ones that are rated in the higher tiers are usually from higher scoring offenses or offenses that run through the team. Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs are probably the highest scoring offense. The Cardinals, they have Kyler Murray run and throw the ball. Same with Lamar Jackson, same with Josh Allen. They get multiple rushing scores, which is why they're in a tier above. Now, could there be a game where J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards rush for all the touchdowns and Lamar doesn't have a lot of passing yards? For sure. But the highest outcome is that Lamar is going to be involved somewhere or the other. Same thing with tight ends. What we see with Travis Kelce, with George Kittle, with Darren Waller. They're involved in the offense more likely than others. Now, there will be some games George Kittle is deployed as a blocker, and that's going to happen. And maybe it's on a week where it's, oh, hey, I could have used him in the fantasy playoffs, and he put up 2 for 23. But it's a higher outcome that he has a good game than some of the people lower. So I think it's based on opportunity and the potential or the ceiling of what you can do based on in the offense you're in.
I like it. So, and everybody's given some great takes and some great ways of looking at it. So I'll keep mine a little bit short here because I don't want to repeat anything that anybody said there. For me, when I look at the tiers and how I kind of group them together, it's based on statistical outcomes that I think are going to happen there. So when I'm looking at a fantasy outcome of a player, you will find when you're projecting guys out that you will find kind of statistical groupings of outcomes and where you think a player is going to finish on overall points at the end of the year. And it's funny, they almost kind of put themselves into groups when you do that. And that's kind of how my tier structure bases out. And how you see that is there's a little bit of a split in there to it, or there's maybe a 15 or 20 point drop off between between player A and player B, like Kevin gave the ranking or the analysis there of Najee and Josh Jacobs. There's a pretty good drop off in points there for me, and that's how I can break those guys out into tiers as well. But we have been kind of talking about this tier system. Let's go ahead and show everybody here a little bit when we're talking about the tiers. And come on now. There we go. Computer decided to work with me. Gotta love some technical difficulties there, but we got it. Okay, so this is kind of how we have.
Wait. Who has Barkley in tier 1? We got to talk.
That would be one Mr. Alex.
All right, I see the guy you are, the Phillip Rivers, unanimous first bout Hall of Famer, Saquon in. I got you. You're the going against the grain guy.
So you can see the
not
the
at
tiers
all.
here.
Not at all.
You can see the tiers here. Me. And when you look at it, right, Alex has got his tier 1 for the running backs: McCaffrey, Cook, Henry, Barkley. Now, when we're going through these tiers, we're doing this all based off of a half-point PPR scoring to it, kind of a mix between a standard and full point there, kind of give you that nice mix. Kevin's got his tier 1 broken out between McCaffrey, Cook, and Elliott, and my tier 1 is McCaffrey, Kamara, and Cook. So, Eric, kind of interested to see your takes on our tier 1s, and which tier would you kind of lean towards there?
I really think Derrick Henry should be in tier 1. Who's the one on the far right? Is that you, Derek?
Yeah, the far right would be me.
You don't even have Derrick Henry in your tier 2?
Nope, and I've been on record saying I see a very big workload regression this year, and I've gone through all of that. But when I projected him out, I only see him at about 320 carries, 324 carries, I think was the actual workload there. I still see him getting a massive amount of yards, but I also see a touchdown regression coming as well. So regression in workload, not having a 2,000 plus yard season and not averaging a touchdown per game, had him dropping a little bit there for me.
Wow. I mean, the guy's like never injured. I mean, I like it. Everybody has their bold takes, and it's important that, you have your reasoning and you're sticking to it. Well, it's weird because the Alex, like on the left, has way more players in different tiers. Overall, I think Kevin's is in the middle, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like that. I'm not as big on Dalvin Cook. I'm at my RB7, which is a spicy take myself, but I'm with McCaffrey and Elliott, and I love Henry, Kamara. Jonathan Taylor, I think people are fading a little too hard, and then Eckler. And we're both big on Eckler. I like it.
And so too, like the way we have these tiers set up there, right? You kind of mentioned that a little bit, where Alex has more in here's tier 1 and tier 2 than either Kevin or I do. But again, that just kind of goes to how you kind of group these guys together, and when you're going into a draft, right? How you ultimately look at that board. So does anybody kind of want to, now that we've got a visual representation there, if you're sitting there and you're looking at the board in the middle of a tier, how you might go about looking at that on who to draft type of thing?
So in the middle of the tier, so are you talking?
So say, all right, so Kevin, in your case, let's say that you're sitting there in towards the back end of the first round there, and all of your tier 2 running backs are available. All your tier 1s are gone. All your tier 2s are there. All your tier 1 receivers are still on the board, and your tier 1 tight ends. Like, where are you kind of going? Walk us through your process on your thought process on something like that.
So if I'm at the back end of the first round, and
yeah, say it's
pick 2,
pick 9 type of thing.
Okay. I think part of it's going to be scoring format for the league. So I think that might alter things slightly. We'll go off of this since we're saying half point PPR. I think at that point it's looking at it and just understanding offensive philosophy, workload, kind of what's going on with that. Quite frankly, inside that tier 2, I should probably kick Eckler up above Taylor, for the simple fact of Henry, Kamara, and Eckler have much less competition at the running back position than Taylor does. Marlon Mack is going to be a factor this year. We've talked about that. You still have Nyheim Hines. That is kind of their pass catching back and is going to take some work away from Taylor. So while I still think he's going to be very productive, I probably need to flip him and Eckler, because I don't think Justin Jackson or Kelly or the rookie that they drafted this year. Anyway, these guys aren't really competition for Eckler. He's still going to dominate 65% of the snap share at least. So at that point, it's kind of how I'm feeling, right? Like, I feel all these guys have the ability to finish in the top 10. I feel like all these guys have the ability to finish inside really the top 5. That's kind of where I have that tier 2. It wouldn't shock me if any of those 4 guys finish inside the top 5. So, I'm taking a look at things, seeing if there's a chance that one of them might fall back to me in round 2. So that plays into it also, reading the room. So I'm probably going to be leaning Henry to start, and then hoping to catch my pass catching back on the return trip. And whether that's a Kamara, Eckler, maybe even looking at how the draft board sits, Gibson might even come into play it then, coming back in the round 2. So it's just my personal opinion about how I would handle that.
Awesome. Alex, any thoughts on the tiers there?
Yeah, the way that I've broken it down is, at least for me, is if I am in the position of throw the 101 out, right? Like the 101, that really McCaffrey could be his own tier, right? But if I'm in a position where I think like, okay, I've got either Cook, Henry, or Barkley, I'm okay taking any one of those 3. Likewise, if we're down into tier 2, I think that a lot of those guys will be available, right? They'll be the ones that I'm comfortable with in that grouping. I think that grouping right there, I think that, any one of those, what do I have, 6? It can easily get into the top 5. I just am not sure which one of those I could see it getting into the top 5. So I really think, those tiers, I have those 4 that I have, I think will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the rest of those guys, I think it's a toss up for who be 5. And that's why I'm okay with having them grouped there, because I'm uncertain at where I think that those 6 are going to finish 5 through 11.
Awesome. Eric, kind of any thoughts that come to mind when we're going through some of that?
Yeah, I mean, as Kevin had talked about, we're week 1 through the preseason. I think, seeing the injuries that come up in training camp, and not to sound negative, but this does happen, that will really kind of any last minute changes or, ranking updates, I think we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully nobody drafts too early. Like with David Montgomery, gets 1 carry, starts limping. Some of us drafted him. So, hopefully we don't see any injuries moving forward.
Right. But last year, David Montgomery also had that preseason kind of injury there as well, where people were scrambling with the Tariq Cohen, and David Montgomery turned out to be a league winner for some folks there.
That's true. You're making me feel a little better. Thanks, Derek.
So you're welcome. I'm just here to make everybody, feel good about it. So when, kind of looking there, we've got the tier 1, we've got the tier 2. Let's go ahead and we'll move on over here to some tier 3. And this is where some things kind of really, really kind of look different there. And when we were going through it, Alex's rankings were down there for his tier 3, took him all the way to like his 18th, 19th running back. Kevin took his down to about running back 15. And I think mine stopped right about running back 12 or 13. I'd have to look that back up there. So you're able to now see kind of into 3 tiers, how these things really start breaking out there and how guys start kind of valuing folks differently. But what are the thoughts here with the tier 3 kind of guys?
Do you, Alex, do you not even have Barkley in your tier 3?
Alex had him in tier 1.
He was in tier 1.
Oh, that's right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm used to Saquon Hayden seeing him lower. I forgot.
Yeah, no, he's 24 years old. He'll be just fine.
Yeah, I hope so. It's interesting. I have Najee Harris higher, and I think it's just because of volume. But I'm seeing him in a lot of these tier 3s with CEH and Gibson. I agree with you guys, Nick Chubb being up there, especially in a non-PPR format. I feel like this is the year we finally figure out if Joe Mixon's the real deal. Like, you can't buy one more year Joe Mixon truthers, and I used to be one. Like,
I still am.
This is the year we are going to find out whether it's real or not.
Especially in a round 3 capital, I'll take him all day. That's my flex position. Absolutely.
At the expo, the joke was if you go 0 running back, you could still get Joe Mixon. Like, I was in a thing, and he fell to like the 4th round, and I didn't even know. I didn't take him. I was like, yeah, maybe if he falls like 2 more, I'll think about it.
That's awesome. So, but yeah, so this one here and tier 3 for me starts being one of those that's really starts kind of breaking away, I think, a little bit, because I still see my tier 3 guys as being very dependable type of backs that can slot in when I'm making that up if I have to go that way for a running back 1. But typically the way that I draft, that's not going to be the case. These are guys that I'm going to be looking to potentially try and put on the turnaround if I'm in the back half of a draft, try and put them on in an early 2nd round type of pick there. Is kind of how I see that and how that breaks down for me. But I'm much higher on some of these guys like Eckler and CEH and Gibson, who are going in the mid to late 2nd round there. I've actually got them in my tier 2 type of talent there. Guys, any other thoughts here on the tier 3 or running back tiers? No? All right. Well, Eric, I know that you've got some JOB stuff early in the morning there.
Corporate America wins again.
There you go. Well, we do appreciate you coming on, hanging out with us tonight. Like everything that you guys are doing over there at the Triple Play. If you can make sure to let everybody know where to find you, where to connect with you.
Yeah, at Triple Play Fantasy. Like I said, I'm the one that runs the Twitter account. I try to be as active as I can, and just appreciate you having me on, Derek. It was nice finally getting to connect with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Appreciate that.
Lot of fun. A lot of like the back and forth there. We'll have to have you back so that you can give
Yeah,
Alex some more hard time there.
When you guys do the Hall of Fame talk, I'll be back for that one.
There we go. That'll be a lot of fun, I think.
Take care, guys.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Appreciate you.
Alrighty, guys. So we've kind of wrapped up some running back tiers there, and we're going to get into some very heavy draft talk here when it comes to some strategy, things like that. And before we do, we're going to go to the old Sports Me Spicy take. We've got some takes as far as how folks draft when it comes to that, and we got that from all over the social media. So here we go.
Derek, this is a great question, and unfortunately I can't give you a super specific answer here because my draft strategy is just to know my stuff well enough that I can react to what's going on. Past what's going to be available for your first pick, there's always people who make weird decisions or runs that start, stuff like that, right? So if you are flexible in how you do things, you can grab a ton of value. Other than that, like I tend to look at my late round picks as picks that have league winning upside, not just dudes I'll sit on my bench because I can't play.
So some great advice, great strategies there coming through. Really liked that was Derek from Sports Me chiming in there and kind of giving his draft strategy there. Also saw some things there. I don't know if you guys caught a little blast from the past there on an Instagram comment there, but we had Chris Croc chiming in there. Chris Croc 19 on the chiming in on the Instagram page there, as well as some great comments coming on Twitter as well. And the Twitter poll when we were getting ready to go showed that folks really prefer kind of going with a balanced strategy when it comes to drafting. So, we're going to go through some of these different draft strategies here, right? You're talking running back heavy. You're talking 0 RB, 0 wide receiver, a balanced type of draft strategy, QB early, QB late. What do you do in a tight end premium? What do you do in a super flex type of thing? So guys, we're going to kind of go through some of those things, and let's just go ahead and start kind of up there at the top with a running back heavy type of strategy. What does that look like for you? And what does that mean when you're talking running back heavy? Kevin's on mute.
That's one.
Because you made me hit the damn button. Using it on my cord.
I know.
Dang it. Running back heavy to me is so we just went through the tiers, and to me that means grabbing as many of those guys as possible in the first 4 rounds. Like that, it does. It can put a damper on you at wide receiver. I think wide receiver is deep enough, right? Where look, we talked about this a little bit last week. Look where Mike Evans is going. I can go and grab 3 of those running backs that I have if I want to go RB heavy, and that's what I'm dead set on, and still get a guy like Mike Evans as my wide receiver 1, possibly someone like a Keenan Allen, and all the things that we think that Chargers offense is going to be able to do this year. So, yes, you miss out on the Diggs, D-Hop, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill grouping. But then you're still able to capture things. Justin Jefferson has been going in the early 4th or late 3rd. So depending on where you're drafting at, Jefferson's still an option there. I know there's a lot of people super high on him again. So you're not doomed at wide receiver if you're going RB heavy, because there's enough depth in the top 20 wide receivers overall that you can still fill out a very nice wide receiver core by not really thinking about the position in the first 3 to 4 rounds.
So before I get going on this RB heavy, it's not really something that I've ever employed. I guess if I had to say what my draft strategy is kind of the balanced strategy, although I do put premiums on running backs in the first couple rounds. So it's like, I guess, a hybrid RB heavy. But I am also in all of the snake drafts that I've ever been in, my goal is to fill out my starting roster first, which is a weird, with the exception of like some weird years where we had kickers and head coaches in our home league. Those guys that they stayed till the end. But my goal is to get the best players that I can at each position when I feel like I can take them. Now, sometimes that backfires on me because there are times where I'm like, I really got to take, a third or a fourth running back just to have some depth because I'm not too confident in the first two running backs that I've got or what have you. But that's kind of been, in terms of snake drafts, the strategy that I've employed. And I can safely say that strategy does not work, at least not very well. So I've had to retrain my brain on how to approach some of these fantasy drafts, especially snake drafts. But when it comes to the RB heavy, Kevin's point is right. You can get 3 or 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds and still have very serviceable, and I use the word serviceable in a very loose term because I think there's still some very good options at wide receiver that you can snatch up rounds 5, 6, and 7 and still have 7 guys that are ready to go and interchangeable at any given time. So I think more than ever, wide receiver is so deep that the zero RB strategy, or excuse me, not zero RB, the RB heavy strategy is much easier to pull off now than maybe even in, 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably right. Let's go ahead and we'll hit up some zero RB, right? And so when you're talking zero RB, you're really talking about taking 0 running backs through about the first 5 rounds on that, kind of the opposite of the running back heavy approach. And the whole purpose behind that is to try and create enough positional advantage at other places so that you can try and sneak out wins and get wins based on that positional advantage. What are your guys' thoughts on a 0 RB approach?
I don't think Kevin's ever tried it. That's 2. I don't think Kevin's ever tried it. 0 RB approach, unless it was for an exercise that we did on this show. So I'm not sure that he can really speak too eloquently for it. I just had a thing pop up on my computer. There we go. But I think that of all of the strategies that we have listed here, 0 RB I think is the riskiest. And I think that if you do it and you do it right, it will pay off big time. But if you miss on any of your first 4 picks that aren't running backs, it's going to be a long season.
Yes. So I have done 0 RB before. Derek, you were in the draft where I did a 0 RB, and I don't love it, but it's working. So 0 RB, what my thought around that is, right? Derek stated it earlier, positional advantages, right? So if I'm looking to implement a 0 RB strategy and create that, I'm looking for guys like Travis Kelce, or I'm looking to double up 2 of the top 3 or 4 receivers, like we just listed.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, Hopkins and Adams, which is who I paired up last year when I did the 0 RB strategy. But you also have Diggs, you have Tyreek. Some people want to throw DK or Calvin Ridley in there to kind of round out your top 5, whatever. But it's to kind of grab Kelce and 1 or 2 of those wide receivers, just because if the other team's going super heavy running back, those guys should fall down to you. And then most likely you're grabbing a quarterback in there too, right? So if I'm looking at doing that, it's something along the lines of Travis Kelce in the first, DeAndre Hopkins in the second, possibly depending on where you're drafting, a DK Metcalf or Calvin Ridley in the third. And then in the fourth, you're looking somewhere along the lines of Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott. Most of the time, Patrick Mahomes is gone. That's why I'm not listing him. People still like grabbing him at, somewhere in round 3. And that's okay. A modified version of that is you can generally, so Kelsey's going in the first, Kittle or Waller, they kind of split between the second and the third. One's going in one round, the other one, and it just depends on the draft. So that's how you can implement the tight end later on, right? If you get Tyreek and Diggs, just to change it up a bit, right? And then you're looking at tight end. So then you're taking Waller or Kittle, whichever one kind of falls to you, to get your tight end filled up. And then you're still going QB in round 4. Like it has to go in that order. QB has to be that last one, essentially, to create that positional advantage. Otherwise, I don't feel like you get enough out of it. Like, I don't feel like in a single quarterback league, you don't really want to take him earlier than that, but you got to grab one of those top 3 tight ends. It's really a must to create that separation, and you got to have one or, preferably 2 of those top 5 wide receivers. Otherwise, I don't feel like, for me, it works very well. I can't create enough separation to where come mid-season, I'm still happy with my team and don't just want to blow it out of the water.
Yeah, it's definitely tough, and I think both of you kind of mentioned that it's one of those that it takes a lot of patience to be able to do that, because especially how we tend to look at a draft board, we kind of look at that running back and go, "Ooh, I gotta go that way, because of especially how our leagues have been set up in the past, where running back plays such a huge positional advantage in itself, and it's a scarcity type of position there. So that kind of leads us to a different, the opposite of a 0 RB, where you're talking 0 wide receiver, where again, you're taking 0 wide receivers through the first 5 rounds or so, again, trying to create positional advantages at other places. And this year you have, a little bit of that you can probably pull off because of the fact that the wide receiver rooms are so deep this year. And, you just have to be okay with putting guys in there with a 5th or 6th round wide receiver as your wide receiver 1. What are your thoughts here?
It's my favorite strategy. So
I figured you'd say that.
Well, a lot of it's for that same reason. And I like going QB late too. So I'm going 0, basically it's kind of modified, I guess, in a sense. Like, I don't traditionally wait 5 rounds before I'm taking my first wide receiver, but I'm totally comfortable taking my first wide receiver in the 4th. And again, it's all about the value. If you can get 3 guys in the top 2 tiers just based off of your draft position, right? This is where picking at the top of the draft is very helpful, because generally you're able to do this easier than if you're picking at the back end of a draft, as far as the running back tiers go, right? So again, where you're drafting, the people you're drafting with, all this stuff matters. But yeah, I'm going, the 2 best running backs, based off of my rankings and what I think they can do, and just kind of pushing that wide receiver value down the board. If a tight end, if one of those top 3 tight ends falls into my lap and I can create that positional advantage, so be it. I will go there. If not, I'm happy looking at running back again, because most likely we're going to be coming up against the edge of some tier break, and I want to try and create a differential in my flex position. So that's another way to do it. Yes, you're reaching for running back, but are you able to create a differential in your flex position? So same concept, just a different way of looking at it. And then, tight end, quarterback, if you're trying to do that in a single QB, or if you're waiting on QB2, your first 3 rounds might be running backs, or 2 running backs and a tight end. And then you hammer the wide receiver list, right? You hammer wide receivers for a couple rounds, and then you go back and you pick up a couple of the filler running backs, whether it's a Carter, whether it's a Raheem Mostert, who's been falling like a brick lately, whether it's a Mike Davis, that type of mid-round guy that you feel like Kareem Hunt is a guy that you can get in the 6th. So you can go 2-2 and, 3-2 and 1, essentially. You can get, Kareem Hunt in the 6th and kind of pair him up. So there's a couple different ways of implementing it. I guess I don't truly go 0 wide receiver and wait that long, but I'm fine punting until at least the 4th, and that doesn't scare me at all.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, you brought up a really, really good point here, and that is, with all of these strategies, there's times where you get to dictate what strategy you want to employ, and then there's times where you almost are forced into a strategy that you have to employ, depending on where you are at in picking order, in the draft order. Because, if you're towards the back half, it's going to be it could be a little bit more difficult to go RB heavy because a lot of those guys will be picked clean, and then you might have to shift and go to a different draft strategy. So that's a good point that you brought up with how you are able to attack drafts. Also, who you're drafting with. You got to know maybe some of the guys in there, at least some of the people in the draft, because you got to understand what their tendencies are. That helps a lot when any sort of information that you can gather going into a draft is way beneficial.
Absolutely. And Kevin Peng's Picks was chiming in saying you just listed every running back that makes me go ew. Meh. Okay, so that's 3.
This stinking button about cussed. But that's what those mid-round running backs are, right? You're not drafting them to anchor your team all the way through the season. You did that when you took a top-end tight end and 2 top-end wide receivers and top-tier quarterback. That's what's anchoring your team. These running backs are filling the void who have the safest floor to not cost you weeks at that point. You have to fill the position out. And if you wait too long, then you're trying to fill it with guys who might get a spot start, might see 7 to 8 touches a game, and you're hoping for a big boomer bust. So yes, while a lot of those guys might make you go, like I could take them or leave them, that's fair if you're taking running backs in the early rounds and you're looking for the separation on that side. But if you already created that separation, now you're looking to bolster with a running back who's not going to cost you weeks and only go, 10 carries for 36 yards and a fumble. Like that's what kills you. So you just need a guy who's a bit safer.
Right. And yeah, as much as I like to, until I really sat down and started going through some of these things, as much as I like to think that I was a running back heavy guy, I think after really going through some of these, I have more of a balanced draft strategy myself. And that's our next topic. There is the balanced draft approach. So really you're drafting the board as it falls to you, and you're really kind of taking the best player available. And this is where knowing your tiers is really going to be very beneficial for you as well, because it allows you to separate those guys out based on those tiers and where you think they're going to group. But guys, what are your thoughts on a balanced draft approach?
This is what a lot of people say they like to do, but the problem is they panic. And guys who say I'm a balanced drafter and aren't, for lack of a better term, professionals, if you will, they panic at runs. And balance doesn't mean that you have to go, all right, in the first 8 rounds, I'm going, I don't feel like I need to chase the early QB. So I'm going to have 4 running backs and 4 receivers, and maybe I'll grab a tight end in the 9th, and then I'll worry about quarterback, because that's balanced, right? Like a true balanced approach is just taking BPA, right? You're just taking the best player available. You're letting the board come to you. You're not forcing the issue. And that works until it doesn't, right? Like it's the old Mike Tyson saying, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And that's what drafts do, guys. Like we all know this. This isn't shocking, earth-shattering news. Like throughout the course of a draft, you will get punched in the mouth. You will get sniped on both sides of you, and you're going to be scrambling a little bit. Like, and that's where, maybe balance kind of helps with that. But if I'm dead set because I already have 3 running backs and I only have 2 wide receivers, like I need to even that out. Like that's where you end up getting caught a little bit. So I use the word balance with a grain of salt when I'm really talking about draft strategies.
Peng's Picks. I think we need to play in a league together, my friend.
Would you like to join a league?
I took him at 101 in a couple rookie drafts this year.
Rookie draft for sure. That's in a tight end premium. Hell yeah.
Yep.
that's money in the bank right there.
Yeah, and I guess, Kevin, you brought up an interesting point there, because I did say that I kind of look at, try and do like a balanced draft when I look at that. And really, I'm just looking to take best player available. So there's times that when I go through a draft that I'm going to take running back, and then I may take take 3 wide receivers in a row, or I may take 2 wide receivers and another running back, just because that's how the board is kind of falling to me. And I'm not trying to necessarily press the issue there. But you're right. When you get hit in the mouth and you get that little pop on the kisser and the tilt starts happening, which we've all seen that when we've done some of the mock drafts on this show, where we even get tilted a little bit on some of those things, and you go, oh my gosh, what does this look like? That's one of those that you've got to kind of have that plan when it really comes into that place.
I feel like the balanced or the BPA strategy at the top end of the draft, so if you're drafting 1 through 3, maybe 4, is about the worst strategy you can get. And a large part of that is, if you're truly going best player available, you're going running back, tight end or wide receiver, tight end or wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Like, at some point you have to force the issue to get guys to fill out your roster and break the mold. So as long as you're comfortable doing that, yes, you can make it work. But because wide receivers so deep, and because they get compressed further down the draft board with all the running back heavy players out there, you got to be able to force the issue when you're going best player available, and maybe not take the best player available, because if you're just going off that strategy, you have a lot of great wide receivers, but you don't have squat outside of your top running back that you took in the first 4 picks. And now you're stuck with a guy like, Damian Harris as your running back too. And you're going, oh my God, what did I just do?
Gotcha. Well, actually, you bring up an interesting point there, because what you're talking about is, and I didn't put it on the sheet here, my apologies, is kind of an anchor RB, or an anchor wide receiver type of approach, where you're anchoring that position down with an RB1 that's a heavy RB1 type of thing, and then you're trying to create positional advantages at other places there. And that was a common thread that we started seeing when folks were commenting in on some of their favorite strategies. There was an anchor wide receiver or an anchor running back, and kind of do what you're talking about there.
Yeah, and that has worked, right? I mean, we've done that in a couple of super flex leagues that you and I have co-owned in, and just kind of talking through strategies. And again, I think a lot of the anchor is, they call it the anchor strategy. I think that's truly a best player available strategy, honestly. Like, because you're getting that top tier guy, he's the best player on your board, because you're not passing up, Derrick Henry for DeAndre Hopkins. Like, DeAndre Hopkins in no draft form is going before Derrick Henry. And anybody who can show me different, please shoot us a snapshot at Good Old Boys FF on Twitter and prove me wrong. But that's just not happening. So yeah, you're anchoring it with the best player available, and then the second go around, if you're still going best player available, well, it's not really the anchor strategy. I just think it's misnamed.
So the way that and this is kind of one of the things that I do, is this best player available, but I also look at best player available at position of need, right? So when I'm looking at, say I've got, 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, and now I'm looking at, okay, do I want to go tight end here? Is the best player available at tight end? And this kind of goes back to our tier system, and where you can actually, work your tiers with each other, right? You can say, my running back tier versus my tight end tier. Well, if I've got running backs that are still available in my tier 3, are those better than my tier 2 tight ends? Or my tier 4 running back, are those better than my tier 2 tight ends? Is that where I'm at with point structure and everything? So I look at best player available when that's a funny question. We'll get to that in a second there, Pengs. But I look at best player available at the position of need, and then you kind of decide, what is that position of need still prevalent, or are you okay if, say, all of the next people take that position of need? Will you still be okay if you get back around to you, and you still need that position? So it's a very interesting, the balanced or the best player available approach. it's so tough to maintain because it's really it's a very reactionary way to draft because you're really not in control of anything. You're letting the board come to you instead of you going out and taking guys that you want to go get.
And that is something that you have definitely preached on this show, Alex, is, go get your guy. Like that is something that you have said multiple times, is get your guy, right? Like fantasy football is fun. So, just because we're saying this is how we would do it doesn't necessarily mean that, that's the end all be all, because there's a point in time where it's okay to go get your guy. And, just don't reach too far to go get him, right? Like
you hope that you don't reach too far to go get him.
Right. Like that's one of those
that you hope that you don't reach too far. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, one of those that say, I don't know, David Montgomery's your guy, like don't take him in the first round. Just, that would be a scenario there, right? Like let the board fall to you a little bit, reach maybe in the third if you really want him, type of thing. But, that's where I'm going with that. Did we lose Alex?
Yeah, he froze up a bit. I'm going to hit Pangs up real quick. All right, so his question is this. Outside the top 3 tight ends, would you consider Andrews or Hockenson best player available? Based off of our consensus rankings, we would tell you that Mark Andrews is the best player available. I am the lone host of the show who ranked TJ Hockenson above Mark Andrews. So I would tell you it's Hockenson. I think that there's such a mystery around what the weapons in Detroit actually are. I feel like they're going to be trailing in most games most of the time. So whether you like Jared Goff or not, that means he's going to have to step back and toss the ball around a little bit. And based off of what we saw in Detroit, or excuse me, he's with Detroit, in LA with the Rams, is he absolutely can service a tight end as far as volume and consistency with what we saw from Higbee at the tail end of 2019. So for me, it's Hockenson. I understand the allure of having the main pass catcher in Baltimore, but there's a good chance that team's going to be running the ball 500 to 550 times this season, where I think the Lions are probably only going to be running the ball about 350 times this season. So to me, that's where the upside of Hockenson comes in.
Gotcha. I read that question just slightly different there. So I'll, the way that I read that is, when would you so you're in the draft, right? And when it's coming up to it, when would you consider that to be the best player available on the board, in relation to the other guys that would also be on the board there? So you're just kind of looking at some ADP there, going right around both of those guys. You've got players like Tyler Lockett going around there, Kenny Golladay, Deontay Johnson, Jamar Chase, Adam Thielen for wide receivers. You've also got guys like Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, Mike Davis kind of going in and around there. And so at that point, it starts becoming to some of the how you've constructed your roster right there. But if I'm staring down at my board, and I think it's fair to say that both of those guys in Mark Andrews and TJ Hockenson will be the number one targeted guy on their respective teams. I think Kevin's right that Hockenson may see a little bit more volume there, but I think Mark Andrews on a better offense has more touchdown upside than Hockenson does. And that was kind of why, my rankings got reflected that way. But, for instance, if I'm staring down, Tyler Lockett, Kenny Golladay, I might take the swing on either one of those tight ends there, just because of the fact that I think both of those guys will be a little bit more consistent than a Tyler Lockett or a Kenny Golladay, who both of those guys have big splash weeks that they can put together. Same thing too with like a Jamar Chase. Like I see him being a splash kind of guy, and he's going to be inconsistent, I believe, over the beginning course of the season, because of what we've seen in the past, where it takes rookies a little bit of time to adjust to the speed of the game and adjust to how that looks and works. But a guy like Deontay Johnson, I would actually probably take him over either one of those guys, again, because he is going to see a ton of volume, how that looks and works on Pittsburgh, I think. I think we got Alex back, maybe.
Serves him right for making fun of my internet connections. Now he's stuck there like a statue, just staring into our souls. But Derek, I'd agree with that. I like Deontay Johnson a lot. I like the fact that I do think he's the number one option in Pittsburgh. So he's a guy who I'm probably leaning more towards. I know people could make a pretty strong argument towards Adam Thielen and his ability to still be very productive at the age of 31. So there's some guys there that I would probably lean over the tight ends, but there's some guys like I have no interest in Chase Edmonds. Like I just don't. I think that they're going to use James Conner more than what everybody thinks as long as he's healthy, whether that's through 3 games or 13 games, who knows? But that's a situation that is real. Kenny Golladay, I like Kenny Golladay, the player, and I probably lean there, but I don't know that I would fault anybody for taking an Andrews or a Hawkinson over Kenny Golladay.
Yeah. So maybe Alex is working a little bit better with just the audio. Are we back? Are you with us, Alex?
I don't even know. I don't.
Well, I can hear you.
Know. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a start.
Serves you right. For
that's a start.
Oh, he's all the way back now.
Yeah, it does.
Maybe
I was going to give a real world example from that point. Oh, no.
Oh, you're back now. Okay, keep going. Real world example. Okay. Let's hear it.
I was going to – the real world example is Carson Wentz for me, right? So with Carson Wentz, it's a guy – I watch Carson Wentz games. I would be paying attention to what Carson Wentz was doing. So it's a round or two early than I should.
All right. So Alex is his Wi-Fi's and his internets looks like they're going again, but yeah, Alex is a guy that
I'm gonna have to call it,
goes out.
Guys. I don't think I'm gonna be able to continue.
Well, now you're back. right when we thought you were out, they pulled you right back in. Maybe not. All right. Well, Alex, if nothing else, we can have you hop on because we're getting ready to head over and do the mock on that anyway, so we can rock and roll that one. Yeah, Kevin will just kind of.
I'll see you guys on the mock.
All right, we'll see you there, brother. Kevin, before we head over to that mock real quick, any quick thoughts on how your strategy might change if you're looking tight end premium or super flex?
I think super flex. In a super flex draft, you pretty well have to grab a quarterback, at least one quarterback in the first 3 rounds, right? Like you just have to succumb to that. Now, if it's only a 10-team league, maybe you could wait a little bit longer. But if it's 12 or more, once you get to quarterback 25, that's not a guy that you necessarily want to have to lean on. There's a lot of weeks where you will have a skill position player on your roster that outscores that quarterback, but you have to be able to figure out which weeks those are going to be, and just creates a little bit more studying. It creates a little bit more waiver wire havoc. So, quarterback wise in a super flex, you have, in my opinion, you really need to grab one in the first 3 rounds, and really both by round 6 or 7, depending on how your draft board's going. And then if you want a third quarterback, you're pretty well tied into him by round 12. And just kind of bounce around. Tight end premiums, it depends on how much the premium is. If it's only half a point, if I don't have, if I'm not grabbing Travis Kelce, I'm content with waiting a little bit, honestly. Like, where Waller or Kittle are going there in the second round. I think at that point, I'm pretty well into, running back or wide receiver mode there in the second round. So that's what I'm looking at. And after that, I'm pretty comfortable playing the roulette wheel a little bit, right? Like if Hawkinson or Andrews falls into my lap, so be it. But at the same time, I can play tight end roulette and I can be okay. I can wait and grab a guy like James Everett, who is in my opinion, and I know Derek, you feel the same way, that he's going to have a role in the Seattle offense. Adam Troutman, who Derek, I know you're super high on. I'm not.
Same with Blake Jarwin.
Yeah, I'm not quite as high, but just situations like that. So tight end premiums do help, but I'm not chasing a mid-round tight end over a guy that I feel like I can create a larger positional advantage on my roster somewhere else.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how I look at that. Unless it's super tight end premium, you won't see me do that. In fact, a lot of leagues that you and I co-manage there, Kevin, you're the one looking at me going, we should probably take a tight end here. And I'm like, nah, we can wait another 4 rounds and pick up a dude. Which is not necessarily a great way to try and employ that. But this year is probably one that is one that I might subscribe to the fact of you can go out and get a guy earlier than on the tight end front. And it may not necessarily be a bad idea to pick up a Kelsey or a Waller or a Kittle up there in the beginning. But if you're outside of that, wait on down the road. So guys, I think let's go ahead and head over into a mock draft. Now, we're going to each kind of run through some of these strategies here. We've got some draft positions. So I'm drafting out of the 4 hole. Kevin is drafting out of the 9 hole. And Alex is down there drafting out of spot 11. And we're all going to be taking a couple of different strategies here. Alex is going to be taking a 0 RB approach to it, which actually is probably a pretty good spot down there, drafting in spot 11. Kevin, where are you're drafting 9? What strategy are you looking to employ here? Unmute.
Whichever one you want, man. I'm good. If you want me to go heavy, if you want me to go more balanced, anchor, I don't care.
You know what? Why don't you show us how it's done with a heavy approach on the RB? I'll take more of a balanced approach on this thing, and we will just kind of rock and roll it that way. So let's go ahead and get this guy started. And again, it starts off super heavy with running back. I don't know what the top 3 are thinking, but it's Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey going there, which leaves me at the 4 spot. I'm going to take Alvin Kamara, who was in my tier 1. And then so getting to Kevin, it went Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Zeke Elliott, and Nick Chubb.
So this is where going back and knowing my tiers really helps. I have Eckler in tier 2. I think he has the possibility to finish top 5, so I really like that.
Okay, I think my internet's working. We'll see how long it holds out for. All right, so after Rhodes picks Eckler, then it goes Aaron Jones. I'm employing a 0 RB, so I think I'm going to go – I'm going to go – tight end here and take Travis Kelce.
I like the move.
Then it goes Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams. I've got the turnaround here. What are we filling out here? Let me just double check really quick. Okay. All right. So if I'm going 0 RB here, I'm going to look at Tyreek Hill.
I like this stack a lot. Like if you're going 0 RB, that is about one of the most premium positions or ways that I feel like you could start off is doing exactly what Alex just did. So Alex, kudos to you, sir. I very much like your approach on that. Come back to me, really honing in on those running backs. I want to make sure I'm set. I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson here. Like, I just like the way this team looks. Pass catching ability, definitely high upside guys. They're saying that they're trying to get Gibson into more of that Christian McCaffrey role. So I really like that here at the turn, starting with these two.
Yeah, I would have really liked it had he made his way on back there. But kudos to you. Joe Mixon, DeAndre Hopkins, Najee Harris, DK Metcalf goes. And then I'm back on the clock here. And even though I'm using a balanced approach, I've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire ranked incredibly high and in a very high tier in my running back. So that's where I'm going to go. After that, it goes A.J. Brown, Patrick Mahomes, George Kittle, Justin Jefferson, Darren Waller, J.K. Dobbins, which then brings it right on back to me. And looking at it, we've got some interesting places that we could go here. But for me, it's going to be a wide receiver. And I'm going to take a guy with some incredible upside as far as I see it. And that's going to be Terry McLaurin.
All righty. So following the Terry McLaurin pick, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, and then Josh Allen. I'm a little bummed. I've seen Montgomery fall back into the late third, so he was a guy that I definitely had my eye on. So I am a little bummed out about that. So I'm saddled with a couple positions here, and I have all these guys in the same tier, ironically. So Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, Darrell Henderson. There are pluses and minuses to all these guys. I am banking on the fact that Jalen Hurts takes that position, the quarterback position, and runs with it. And we see Miles Sanders continue to do what he finished up kind of the last 4 weeks of the season with in Philadelphia. So Miles Sanders is going to be my third running back. So my flex spot, essentially.
Okay, so still employing the zero RB. Keenan Allen goes after Miles Sanders. I was really bummed that was Keenan Allen was the guy I had my eye on there, so that kind of stinks. But I am still okay here, and I will take Allen Robinson in the hopes that when it gets back to me on the turn, and it did, I'm still in okay shape. All right, so Allen Robinson, I take then Chris Carson and Amari Cooper for the turnaround team 12, back to me at 11. And I'm going to go quarterback here, and I'm taking Kyler Murray.
I like that pick for you a lot, Alex. I really do. So I'm coming up. I've kind of gone my running back heavy approach. And really just to kind of show what you can do at the wide receiver position is where I'm going to go here. This is where the dilemma comes in, right? And I realize I'm on the clock. So you can either grab a guy if you're only running one flex spot, right? Do I really need that first bench player to create all that depth? Quite possibly, especially with three guys who could, who already have missed a little bit of time here, there, and everywhere. So it's nice to have that, but it's kind of dealer's choice at this point, right? You can either force the other running back because Darrell Henderson is still out there. I still have him in the same tier as Miles Sanders, so I don't feel like I'm hurting anything at this point. But I really like what I'm seeing at wide receiver here. So this is where I would pivot, and this is my piece of the Tampa Bay offense in Mike Evans.
That's a really good pick there. And then after Evans, CeeDee Lamb goes, Lamar Jackson, Darrell Henderson, DJ Moore. So that puts me kind of back on the clock here. And as far as that goes, I can go several different positions, several different ways here, but just kind of looking at a balanced approach. I've got a big play upside kind of guy in Terry McLaurin there. And I'm going to take a guy that, I think is still going to have a phenomenal season, kind of playing with Tom Brady down there, and go with a Chris Godwin. ETN, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Kyle Pitts go. And so this is kind of the spot that, Peng's pick was talking about, where when do some of these tight ends and when do some of these guys start becoming a best player available? And this is a point where you could potentially make that case because of the fact that you can see guys like Mark Andrews still out there, TJ Hawkinson out there. As far as wide receivers go, it's like Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, Dak Prescott. But since I'm looking at it from a kind of a balanced approach, I'm going to take a guy that I think is going to score the most points here, and that's going to be Dak, who I think is going to have a phenomenal record-setting type of season.
All right. So Dak went. Cooper Kupp follows. Mark Andrews, the tight end that Derek was just talking about. Adam Thielen, Jamar Chase. So going back and looking at rankings, just kind of seeing where everything's shaken out. How do I feel about things? I've already made it clear. I have no interest in Chase Edmonds here. Like he's a running back that will consistently fall here to the back end of the fifth. Mike Davis is a potential option, which I could employ. But one thing that I've been looking at and that I really, really like is being able to, you can take this two approach. If I wanted to stack anybody, I'm going Justin Herbert here. Stacking with Austin Eckler, kind of gain all that. So single QB format, I understand we're not talking super flex here, but this is a position where I could grab Justin Herbert and I wouldn't feel too bad about it. But I'm going to wait a little bit longer on quarterback, and instead I'm going to grab Deontay Johnson.
Okay, well, that changes a few things up for me because I thought you were going in a completely different direction there.
The tilt happened.
I'm still going to employ the 0 RB because I think the guy that I kind of want is going to be there in 3 picks after I make my pick. At the wide receiver spot still is Golladay, Thomas, Ayuk, and Higgins. I'm not sold on the quarterbacks that are throwing to Golladay or Thomas, but I don't mind the 1 or 2 quarterbacks that might be throwing to Ayuk. So I'm going to take Brandon Ayuk here. After that, it's TJ Hawkinson, and then it's Justin Herbert. And now I'm going to, in round 6, address my needs at running back. And there are several needs. Edmonds, Davis, and Javonte Williams are still on the board, as is James Robinson and Raheem Mostert. With what Kevin is saying, I'm not sure that Edmonds is the smart play here. He might be. Davis down in Atlanta is probably the safer one. But since I'm only employing 0 RB, and I'm not going to look at my tier-based system right now, I'm going with the hometown kid, Javonte Williams.
A little spicy there.
Spicy.
It's a little spicy there. I'd be
How many people are going to be
I'd be
able to say
interested if
Javonte
this wasn't a
Williams
mock,
there
if you'd
first?
still take that.
Probably
I
not.
liked Javonte Williams for my team because I could sit him on the bench and I didn't have to worry about the split carries at the beginning of the season, and instead employed Javonte Williams at the end of the season, where I feel like he's really going to dominate the lion's share of the carries for the Broncos. So that kind of changed things up. It's going to make me look around here a little bit. But what I'm going to do here is looking at wide receiver, the values in the wide receiver position. Like, I understand that the value is in the wide receiver position. But I'm going to change things up slightly. Do I want to change things up slightly? I am, because I'm going to push the issue for people who don't have running backs. And I'm going to take James Robinson.
Alrighty, so after James Robinson, it's Kenny Golladay, Odell Beckham, T. Higgins, then Chase Edmonds goes. And really kind of an interesting spot here where I can go kind of, either direction. I've got Michael Thomas, who, talent-wise, best player available here. However, he's going to be missing time, especially over the beginning part of that season. Chase Claypool, who right now, again, is dealing with a kind of his second injury of this preseason here, which then leads us to some other options I can go with. Raheem Mostert's on the board. I do like that San Francisco run game. And even though I think Trey Sermon may end up becoming a little bit more of take the lion's share of that, Raheem Mostert's a guy that can, score you 15 to 20 fantasy points on 10 touches. So that's who I'm going to go with there. Then Mike Thomas, Ronald Jones, Aaron Rodgers, Chase Claypool, Cortland Sutton, Tom Brady goes, and it's back to me. So again, several things that we can do there. I'm going to kind of press the issue here a little bit and get some depth for early in the season. And a guy like Melvin Gordon looks a pretty good pick there.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hop on the Trey Sermon bandwagon because I want that other piece of the San Francisco offense. So again, heavy RB. I have 5 running backs right now, only 2 wide receivers. And now's, coming back around is where we'll start seeing some of these wide receivers kind of move around, and you can see the depth you can still get.
And after you, Noah Fant went, and I'm not sure if Alex is on tilt or what's the deal is over there.
Very much on tilt right now. Very, very much on tilt because I need another running back, and the pickings are getting slim. So Damian Harris, Leonard Fournette, David Johnson, and Michael Carter are the options right now.
It's a very easy pick for me.
I agree.
Is it?
It is.
Okay. I think I know who it is, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to take a stab here and see how you guys feel about this. But I'm going to go Leonard Fournette.
Probably not the way I would have gone.
Okay. Then David Johnson, then Juju Smith-Schuster. The good thing is I have another shot at the running backs here. So I guess I will go Damian Harris here.
Wrong pick again. All right, so here's where I'm
Michael
conflicted.
Carter.
I love Michael Carter. I love him in this mid-round range. Like if you're, in my opinion, if I'm going 0 RB, Robinson, Sermon, and Carter are the guys that I'm kind of targeting here. I've loaded up on wide receiver, done whatever. So that's not my strategy for the sake of the draft. But once again, I'm going to use this as trade fodder, and I'm going to have an embarrassment of riches at running back.
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah. So
6 of your 8 players.
So Alex, I don't necessarily mind the Damian Harris pick there. I probably would have drafted the Michael Carter over the Leonard Fournette there. But had you gone those 2 routes, Damian Harrison, I think will get a lot of run kind of between the 20s there. I think Cam caps his upside, but he would have definitely been a little bit, definitely give you a little bit of a volume type of pick this late in the draft there. So I don't necessarily mind that. Now looking at this, I've got several options that I can go with here as well. A guy that quite frankly gets overshadowed by his other 2 cohorts on the team is a guy I'm going to go with here, and a guy that I think will see some pretty decent volume out there in Cincinnati, and that's Tyler Boyd. Laviska Shenault goes, Curtis Samuel goes, Jalen Waddle, Zach Moss, Jarvis Landry, and James Conner go, putting me back on the board. And we're kind of into a lot of tight end and quarterback type of area, and I'm not necessarily huge fan of the tight ends right here. I've already got my quarterback, so I'm going to take a look over here at the wide receiver room, and that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to actually employ a strategy we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Smitty on that, where I'm going to do something never done before called handcuffing a wide receiver and taking Antonio Brown here.
I like that. I was thinking the same thing for my pick, so I have 0 issues with that whatsoever. So Antonio Brown went, followed by Kenyon Drake, A.J. Dillon, Logan Thomas, Matt Stafford. This is what the beauty is about single quarterback leagues is every team has at least 1 quarterback except mine, and for all intents and purposes, I am completely okay with it. Like I have no issues because there's still guys, Ryan Tannehill, Joe Burrow. If you're a Trevor Lawrence truther, he's still out there. So there are plenty options to be able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and push it. Do I want to push it? No, I'm going to grab a guy that I'm super high on. I think he's kind of being forgotten because of what they're doing at Indianapolis, but I am going to go ahead and grab Michael Pittman in the 9th.
I like that pick there.
You're killing me. All right.
It's just a precursor for our home league, buddy.
I
You just get ready
know.
for it.
I know. Anyway, so after Michael Pittman goes Ryan Tannehill, I don't need a quarterback. I am going back to looking at the wide receiver room here. Mike Williams is available. Marquise Brown is available, and Corey Davis are the top three listed. The running backs really don't give me too much excitement with Singletary, Edwards, and Pollard. So I will look at I think I'll go and try and get a piece of this Chargers offense, and I'll take Mike Williams here. After Williams goes Robert Tonyan and then Joe Burrow, and still faced with the same three running backs staring me right in the face. So I'm going to just take a flyer early, and I mean early. This is way too early to draft this guy. But I'm going to bank on the fact that it maybe doesn't play all season with Christian McCaffrey, and I'm taking Chuba Hubbard here.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
I know I need some wide receiver depth. I'm looking for a tight end. So there's been 10 tight ends taken. There's been 13 quarterbacks taken. So I'm just kind of hanging out and seeing what's out there. Gesicki's on the board, Higbee's on the board, Gronk, Irv Smith Jr., who a bunch of people are extremely high on this year. I can kind of take it or leave it. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of the high-octane Dallas Cowboys offense.
That was actually who I was looking at on the next go-around.
Damn, I'm sniping both of you. Look at this. Like, I love this.
Yeah, that was one of those that I was looking at that going, man, that is I really like that if he falls there because of what that could mean. But so that kind of leaves me in an interesting position here, right? In the 10th, can go several different ways, right? Can start looking at potentially some upside with some of these guys, seeing if I can't find a guy that, can really kind of become a late round darling for me. I've still got the tight end position to fill, still have a defense to fill, still have a kicker to fill, as well as rounding out the last couple of spots on my bench. So looking at it, I've got very balanced as far as 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and a quarterback here. 2 bench spots left, so it starts becoming a where do you want to go? And a guy that I've actually been liking and kind of raising up is a guy that right now is the number 1 running back on his depth chart, or at least the co-starter there, and that's Phillip Lindsay. Corey Davis goes, Gus Edwards goes, Henry Ruggs, Irv Smith, Gronk, Devontae Parker, and now it's back to me in the 11th. Might be a good time to start taking tight end. They're starting to get kind of taken there, and I'm going to take a guy that I have been incredibly high on this whole offseason that I think is going to do some big things, and that's going to be Adam Troutman.
So Troutman goes. Matt Ryan is off the board. Tony Pollard, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Mooney, who he's kind of a preseason darling here to begin with. So lots of things going on. I'm looking at the board. Nyheim Hines. I feel like I'm pretty set at running back at this point, right? Because I loaded up so early, so I don't feel like I need another running back. So then it's Elijah Moore, Mecole Hardman, Latavius Murray, Baker, Nelson Aguilar, Bateman, Russell Gage. So there's still some options out here depending on what you want to do, what positions you're looking to fill. Definitely thinking that it's time to step in the arena here. And my first quarterback is actually going to be my backup quarterback. But I do think he has the ability to kind of be a league winner depending on how the season goes for the 49ers. And I'm going to grab Trey Lance.
Oh, you son of a gun.
I think you did that more of as a case just to really, really put Alex on tilt there.
You are just kidding me. All right. So after Trey Lance goes, and I've said a number of curse words towards Kevin. Jamal Williams goes, I'm on the clock here. I really, I've got 4 wide receivers. We start, 2 with a flex, wide receiver, running back, tight end spot. I'm really going to look at wide receiver here. Best available, according to Sleeper here, is Mecole Hardman. The problem is I already have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, so that would be silly to add Mecole Hardman. Elijah Moore, don't really trust the quarterback there. Marvin Jones, not really sure about the quarterback there in Jacksonville. Nelson Aguilar, which I'm pretty sure he just dropped another pass headed his direction. So I'm actually going to go a little bit further down and go to a guy who is emerging in what will likely be a pass-happy offense. And I'm going to take Russell Gage here. Then Nyheim Hines goes. Then Elijah Moore goes. Still need to fill my kicker and defense. I'm going to save those for the last 2 rounds unless – yeah, I'm going to save those for the last 2 rounds. And I'm going to grab just another quarterback as my backup. And I will also take, again, trade fodder, Justin Fields.
So Justin Fields goes, Mecole Hardman follows him, and now we're back on it. So quite frankly, 14 or 15 rounds. I thought we were doing 15.
It's 14.
All right, we're doing 14. So it's time to grab a tight end, seeing what I can do. So the Patriots tight ends are out there: Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, Austin Hooper. That mix is there. I think I might go with a bit of a shocker here. I'm going to grab Evan Ingram because I think he's still the second most reliable pass catcher that the New York Giants have.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. So after Evan Ingram, Marvin Jones, Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry, then the Washington football team defense goes. Now I've got a guy that I really want to put on my last spot for my position, but I'm pretty sure that he's going to make it all the way to me in that 14th round here. So I'm going to fill out some of my last positional spots here, and I'm going to go with the Patriots defense right here. Then Latavius Murray goes, Rashad Bateman, T.Y. Hilton, Justin Tucker, the Baltimore defense, the Bills defense. That puts me back on the clock. I'll take my kicker here, and there's some good ones out there. I think I'm going to take it off of a high-scoring Chiefs offense and take Harrison Butker.
I like that. So Cousins goes, followed by Suck Up, Alexander Madison, the Rams defense and special teams. And so now it's back to me. The defenses are kind of flowing. The number 2 overall defense from last year is still hanging out there. So I'm going to snag the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Interesting. After the Steelers, Young Hoku goes. I am going to take the San Francisco 49ers defense. Then Tyler Bass goes. The Browns defense goes. I need a kicker. We are in the last round number 14. And I will take Rodrigo Blankenship, the Indianapolis Colts kicker.
Hey, there you go. So no one said we had to fill out all the positions of our roster, so I'm not going to. I stream kickers all the time anyway. Like, if your league's set up to where you have to fill out your starting lineup, obviously I would be forced into taking kicker here. Those are not the rules we set forth. So back to quarterback to kind of have my true starter week over week. And we have Baker Mayfield, Tua Tagovailoa, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson still out there if you think that something's going to happen and he's going to be able to be on the field. And quite frankly, That's where I'm going to go, guys. Like, I'm going to grab Watson with the last pick in the draft, thinking that he might play the first 3 weeks until Trey Lance takes over the back end of the season. And if Watson doesn't play and he gets suspended, I drop him up. I'll pick up Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Washington will throw the ball enough that Fitzpatrick will put up serviceable numbers for me.
All right, you very well could be right. Then Saunders goes, Crosby goes, the Chiefs defense goes, Jason Meyer goes. That puts me back on the clock. I'm going to take a guy that I think has huge potential upside here, and definitely some good stuff there. And that's going to be Paris Campbell, Zerline, Prater, and the Colts defense ends the run there and wraps up the draft. So, guys, kind of looking through that, how do you feel about your team so far? Give a quick rundown of them, and tell us how you feel about your team.
I guess I'll kick it off here. So, team: Austin Eckler, Antonio Gibson, Miles Sanders, Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson, James Robinson, Trey Sermon, Michael Carter, Michael Pittman, Michael Gallup, Trey Lance, Evan Ingram, the Steelers defense, and Deshaun Watson. I like this team. I feel like I can win with this team. I feel like I have enough depth at running back that if Michael Carter, if any one of that second three, right? If James Robinson has a big first week, I might be able to move him around for something. But if Trey Sermon or Michael Carter start off with a pop, typically rookie running backs, if they start the season off hot, they do fade down the stretch. So then I can take one of those guys and maybe I upgrade my quarterback position or my tight end position, right? Those are my weaker ones, and I'm aware of that. But overall, I feel like this is I'm going to give it a solid B+. I don't think I'm quite there in the A range, but I think I'm floating around that 88, 89%, and I'm okay with that.
That's funny because I'm looking at my team with Kyler, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, Tyreek Hill, Allen Robinson, Travis Kelce, Brandon Ayuk, Rodrigo Blankenship, the Niners defense, Damian Harris, Mike Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Russell Gage, and Justin Fields. And I feel like I have really, really high end at some of the positions, and then my running backs need a lot of help. So Kevin and I would probably be in talks almost immediately after the draft ended about who on my team he really likes and who on his team I really like, because that man's got all the damn running backs in this league.
Your team would look a lot different, right? And this is how the draft fell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your team would look a lot different with Trey Sermon and Michael Carter on it. I think you'd feel a lot better now that you've seen your complete roster than Fournette and Harris. And part of that is just my personal opinion compared to what you were thinking when you were drafting. But it's, running out 3 rookie running backs, like, man, that takes some balls too. So yeah. I get that. Like it's hit or miss, but overall, Alex, I think for a 0 RB approach, I think you did a pretty good job with it. I don't love the Fournette Harris thing, like I just said, but that's my personal opinion, because there's some other areas where you probably grabbed a guy that maybe I should have right before it got to you.
And so, when I kind of look at that too, Alex, you've got enough, you kind of already said that you've got enough high-end power that you're going to be able to create a lot of positional advantages that, like Kevin's team, is going to have a heavy positional advantage at running back. You've got a difference maker at tight end that, is probably going to outscore whatever tight end you're playing by a good 5+ points every single week. Same thing too, right? When you're looking at that wide receiver, Tyreek's going to give you the big pop type of weeks and do very well. Allen Robinson's going to also give you a lot of consistency there. And so really kind of when you look at your top 5, I think you're going to be able to get enough positional advantage there that it's going to overcome some of that running back depth that just isn't there. But overall, for employing a 0 RB strategy, I think you did very, very well. Looking at my roster, I went with Alvin Kamara, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin, Dak Prescott, Raheem Mostert, Melvin Gordon, Tyler Boyd, Antonio Brown, Phillip Lindsay, Adam Troutman, the New England Patriots defense, Harrison Butker, and Paris Campbell. And for my roster, yeah, I'd probably give it a good kind of, probably somewhere in a B range type of thing. I think I've got a lot of good pieces there, but I don't know that I necessarily have a ton of swing for the fences upside there, but I think I've got a fairly decent floor when it comes to it. So, it's good, not great kind of thing is how I'm looking at this one here. Guys, any other thoughts on any of these draft strategies or anybody else's team?
No, I think it's always fun to see, right? The more mocks you can do just to kind of get a feel. And granted, AIs do things differently than the people do, but it's always nice to see just, again, what range these guys are going in. Like, I'm perfectly happy with someone taking Saquon ahead of me and pushing a running back that I like more further down the line, drafting later. But you see good things. I really like Alex's, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill stack. Like, that's fun. Like, that is electric. That is, a lot of high octane weeks, and both guys are seeing 17 to 18% target share, if not higher on any given week. So he's seeing tons of targets. He's seeing volumes. The touchdowns are going to be there with that Chiefs offense. And having Kyler another year into that Cliff Kingsbury offense, I really like what he did with this tight end, quarterback, and wide receiver position. So I think he set up the proper separation, right? What we talked about, positional separation. I think Alex did a good job at that. And now he can help, navigate and work the waiver wire or trade lines to try and upgrade, a tight end position, right? I'd be looking to pass off Brandon Ayuk and seeing what kind of running back you could get for him, just because there's enough people who believe in him that you could get a really solid running back to help float the top of your roster in that position group, and it's not going to hurt your wide receivers.
Yeah, as the first 4 picks, like, if you tell somebody, hey, you're going to have these 4 guys on your team, like, you're going to be really excited about that, but there is the cost to that, and that is, especially with how this one played out, the slim pickings at running back there when I finally went to that position in the, 5th round, 6th round. But if you tell somebody, hey, you're going to have Kyler, Kelce, Tyreek, and Brandon Ayuk, yeah, I think many people will be, yeah, okay, I'm pretty good with that. But then you have to consider what the running back situation is going to look like too.
Right. So team 6 in this draft was an AI slot, but implemented a similar strategy to what I was doing as well. They went very running back heavy to begin with, only the computer didn't back that up with any real wide receiver depth at all. So they went Barkley, Najee, DeAndre Harris, Barkley, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Darrell Henderson, Mark Andrews. That was a kind of a nice piece to help create some positional separation from a lot of the rest of the league. But then T. Higgins, who I really like, Devontae Smith is his second wide receiver. I think that's where it really falls off a cliff there from 1 to 2, not knowing what you're going to get out of the passing game in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts to the stack there. That's kind of nice, right? He makes up for it a little bit. And then it's A.J. Dillon, Trevor Lawrence, which is a nice pairing with Jalen Hurts, Tony Pollard, Hunter Henry. So, even these AI, that's a realistic grouping. I think it's probably missing a wide receiver to make it truly accurate, but that's a pretty realistic idea of what a team could look like.
Yep, absolutely. Well, guys, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Do the mocks. It's draft season. Hit us up. We love questions. We have answers. We have opinions. We have banter about just about everything. So as you're getting into it, let us know where you're drafting. Let us know what you're looking at. If you feel like it's the right position, keeper questions or running rampant this time of year. So feel free to hit us up. We'll see what we can do, and maybe we'll do something kind of a on-air mailbag type thing next week if I can convince Derek to put that into the show notes of draft situations people are put into, so that way y'all can hear what's going on in the fantasy world around you and how we would help navigate those waters.
And you should know that as we talk through some of these questions like we do on the show, we do that too when you hit us up on Twitter or whatever. Derek puts that out to everybody, and we give our opinions on what we think of said questions. So when you're getting an answer, it's an answer that we've come to, and maybe we don't agree. All three agree on it, but we'll let you know. Hey, here's what we're thinking on it. So we'll give you honest advice. May not be great advice at times, coming from especially this direction, but it's a consensus, or it's advice, and sometimes when you get more opinions in, it'll help you form your own opinion.
Absolutely. If you guys hit us up, you'll get a message back saying it was a split decision or consensus decision, unanimous decision, all of those types of things. We'll let you know whether or not there was even some disagreement amongst us on what your topic in question was. We very much enjoy getting those and being able to help y'all out trying to win that cash and trophies. Make sure in order to send us the stuff, you're following us on the socials. It's at Good Old Boys FF on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Make sure you head over to YouTube, click that little subscribe button and the bell button on the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. And we've got the website where we've got all the rankings, all of that good stuff at goodoldboysff.com. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.